Hello and welcome everybody to an episode of Unlimited Power TCG where we do something we've not done in a little while, which is look at one of the starter decks and how you might tweak and improve it if you wanted to use it as a base going forward for a deck in at least semi-competitive play. And we've chosen to look at Ahsoka ECL. And you might wonder why we've chosen to do this with set 4 right around the corner. And the answer is set 4's not just here yet. And go wide decks and aggro decks such as this are always of interest. Plus, Ahsoka is potentially a pretty powerful aggro deck, especially in a set where everybody's going to be looking to go to space with all spaceships and pilots. So having a more ground-focused coordinate deck based on clones could be interesting. What do you think, John?
Yeah, well, we played this the other night where you were using the Ahsoka deck, and I found the damage very overwhelming. Once you got a little bit of board control with all the coordinate that's in the deck, and I suppose that's one of the questions to ask is like, do you add even more coordinate? Because when you start getting that coordinate out, the amount of power that or the amount of damage you start dealing to the base turn on the turn just becomes almost insurmountable, right?
So the coordinate that I found was kind of the right amount. What I have added in here is a lot more unit generation and unit creation. So there's a lot more things in there to go wide on the board and make sure there's more units alive on the board to fuel that coordinate with, which I felt was a bit more of the weak point on it.
Okay, cool.
And one thing I looked at was so straight up, there are no legendaries in here. Initially, it was going to be a commons and uncommons improvement only because they're very accessible for people to get hold of and be able to refine the decks with. But to be honest, rares aren't really that expensive either to get hold of if you want to get hold of singles from Card Market or your friends or trading or whatever. So I've gone so far as to put rares in here, but there's no legendaries.
Okay.
So the first step was base, and I thought, what base would I want to change it to or change it with? Eventually, I settled on Energy Conversion Lab, the ambush base from set 1 that says play a unit that costs 6 or less from your hand, give it ambush for the phase, which is very powerful. But there was another alternative that I looked at instead, and let me just switch into here to mix up what I could have changed it to. And the card that I strongly considered changing it to instead was this Droid Manufactory instead, which is a set 3 rare base. It says when you deploy your leader, create 2 battle droid tokens. They're only 1/1, and they cost you 6 hit points. But that means the turn you flip Ahsoka, you get her and 2 extra units on the board all at the same time. So immediately, that's your coordinate online right there.
Yep.
And that was pretty powerful. But I figured that ECL is more powerful in the late game for units that are resources are like 4, 5, and 6, and so forth. And you can kind of stack your deck with early units that create more clones or tokens, such that it's kind of redundant creating a pair of 1/1s alongside Ahsoka, really. So that's kind of where I went to with that.
Yeah, 6 hit points for 2 1/1s does feel like quite a big sacrifice, right?
Yeah, exactly. Whereas 5 hit points for the ambush is very tasty, and this is taking a moment to refresh, which is unhelpful. But the main thing that I've done here is there we go, cool. I've gotten rid of all of the like 1 of here and 2 of there, and I've made it a lot more consistent so that everything I've got in here, I've got 3 copies of almost everything. In fact, I've got 3 copies of everything across the board going into the sideboard where I've got 2 of something because you've got to have 3s of everything and then 2 to round it up to 50. And then the one left over goes into the sideboard for sake of argument. So what this means is by having the less variety of cards in there, it's more consistent in you're going to be seeing the same cards over and over across the gameplay, which means you've got less versatility in what tricks you have to bring against any particular game, but your gameplay doesn't significantly change game from game.
Okay, well, that makes a lot of sense.
Cool. So what I've gone with here, so we've kept this starter level card in the deck for running it because essentially it's a 1/2, which is not bad for 1, but when you've got coordinate online, a 2/3 for 1 is pretty powerful.
Yeah.
If you can play 2 1-cost units on turn 1, that's ideal. So I've got 6 1-cost units in the deck, 3 of that one and 3 of this. And this is basically a 1/3 for 1, but on the attack it's a 2/3 for 1. And it doesn't require any coordinate to kick off. So in an ideal world, I play 2 of these straight away because none of their abilities are relevant to having coordinate or not.
That's cool, yeah. And it's cheap and online quickly. 1/3 for 1 is good.
Yep. It's a common, so that's pretty easy to get hold of.
Yep.
My other turn 1 plays include such joys as this one here.
I was going to actually ask about this guy. Cool.
Yeah, how so? What do you want to know?
Well, just because I think there was 2 in the starter deck, so you've upgraded it to 3.
Yeah, and as a common, that should be fairly easy to do. A 1/3 is relatively survivable for a 2-drop. On the attack, he'd be a 3/3 with coordinate active, so that's nice and useful. The only real downside to him I found in testing this deck is that he doesn't have the heroic aspect on it. So there are some abilities in this deck that benefit other heroic units, so he doesn't benefit from those. But otherwise, he's a pretty solid and useful card. But the most powerful one has got to be this guy here, because when your coordinate kicks off, he's a 4/4 for 2.
That's really crazy. Good. So there was only 1 Echo in this starter deck, right?
Yep.
So you've increased it to 3.
Yep. And that's an uncommon level card. It's not hard to get hold of, but again, it's an Echo, and you can only have one of them in play at any given time because he is unique. Okay. So those are my 12 turn 1 potential plays. We'll mulligan for those. In an ideal world, I want a pair of 1-drops. 1 costs. But otherwise, we can go with the 2s if we need to. It's just because the 1s help beef out your board presence and make it a little bit harder for the opponent to clear out your volume of units. Moving on to 3-cost units. This one is such a useful card. You're not going to play it all the time.
Okay.
But the majority of this deck is Republican clones. So yes. You're almost certainly always going to be able to play this and heal 3 damage from your base, which can be very, very useful when you're facing another aggro deck. And it's a 3/3 and it's Republic, it's clone and all of that as well. So that's kind of handy.
Sorry, before we move on any further, did we remove the Coruscant Guard?
If it was a 2-cost, and I've not mentioned it by now, yes, it's been removed.
Okay.
Reason being is because Ambush is great, but the low amount of attack that card has, combined with Ambush being coordinate centric, means you've got to have 2 units on board to play it for the coordinate to kick off when you do it. And when you do, it doesn't hit very hard because it doesn't have a lot of attack with the Ambush anyway. So I didn't think it was that worth it.
Okay. All right. Good. I like to hear your reasonings. You're the professional among the 2 of us.
No worries. No, that's cool.
I'm sure the viewers like to hear that as well. So cool.
Oh, it's appreciated. So the 501st is a potential turn 2 play. Another potential turn 2 play is this guy. And he goes back to that thing I was saying where he buffs heroic aspect units. Each other friendly heroic unit gets +1 health, which makes them obviously that little bit more resilient, a little bit more likely to stick around, which is great in a deck where you want as wide a board as possible.
And because you have 3 of these, do they stack?
No, they don't stack because he's unique. You can only have one of them out at any given time.
Oh, sorry. Okay.
No worries. There's 3 of them in there mainly for consistency's sake because he's useful and it's great to just draw what you need when you need it.
Yeah.
What else have I got in terms of 3? Yeah, this is probably the more ideal turn 2 play that I have because for 3 resources you're getting a 2/1 and a 2/2. Perfect for building a wide board. 1 hit point clone is exceptionally easy to kill, but
yes.
Yeah, that doesn't really matter too much because if they go for that one, they'll leave the 2/2 on the board and you'll have 1 or 2 units in play from your turn 1 as well, hopefully.
Yeah, so you have the potential to get a lot of units on the board quickly with this deck.
Relatively quickly, yeah.
Yeah.
And that's all of my 3-cost units from here. So if there's any others that are in the Ahsoka deck base that I haven't mentioned, that I drop them.
Okay. The 3-cost would have been the Republic Commando that had Saboteur, right?
Yep. Gotcha. Again, Saboteur behind a coordinate lock wall I didn't feel was doing too much. I want to use the early stages of the deck to build out a wide board and then punch on like 4, 5, 6, and 7.
Yeah, I think that's the only 3 costs that would be potentially missing.
Cool. Moving on to turn 3 plays with 4 resources. This is the first unit that I would consider using ECL on. Ambushing in with 3 attack isn't really all that punchy, but if you do ECL with her, you could potentially kill a turn 1 or a turn 2 play with only 3 hit points. She will then buff any clone troopers you've got with +1 attack, and she would create an additional clone trooper token because she'd be attacking at the same time she's being played. So that is an option right there.
No, that's a cool option. Sorry, so you removed both the patrolling V-wing in space and the Republic Arc 170 in space.
Yes, I would have done that. Yeah.
So you've gone very hard on the ground
Yeah,
here, I
there's
guess.
there's like I think there's one space unit in this deck and another one in sideboard. This is a very ground centric deck.
Okay.
I think aside from Shark Team, my other and main turn 3 play on 4 resources is not strictly a unit, but it is a unit essentially. It's you pay 4 resources and you get 2 clone trooper tokens out of it.
So 2/2/2s.
Yep.
Or 2 times 2 times 2, yeah.
Yeah. So at this point,
Okay.
you're still not planning on hitting very hard. You're kind of building your board with these sorts of turns where you're creating ideally multiple units each turn, building up to 5 resources, which is where it starts to hit hard.
Okay.
Cool. On 5 resources, this is another card that I would strongly consider ECLing in potentially to take out a 3-hit. Oh, sorry. Yep.
So we just curiously, you lost heavy.
Yes, I lost heavy.
You didn't.
I decided not to include heavy.
Yeah. Okay. Interesting, because when we played, I felt like heavy was very strong, actually.
Yeah. So when defeated, dealing 1 damage to each enemy ground unit can be tasty. Raid 2 is obviously very good because that makes him a 6/4 on the attack. But I kind of dropped him because at this point in the game, I felt like the strategy for the deck still felt like building up my deck rather than working on punching too hard. If I sacrifice the point where I'm building and creating more units and more units and more units, then that hampers my ability to hit hard on the 5, 6, and 7 resource turns, essentially.
Nice. Okay, yeah, that makes perfect sense. Cool. The heavy is still good. I still like him.
Oh yeah, he's absolutely a solid card. I totally agree.
Okay. Good to see the strategy.
No worries. Cody, I imagine his benefits should be pretty obvious at any given look. By this point, you've got 3, 4, 5 units on the board. Even if you've only got 2 and he's the 3rd one, then he gives them all +1/+1 and overwhelm, which allows a very nice punch. He overwhelms himself, which means you've got potential to ECL him in at that point. Plus, also on 5 resources, you're playing Ahsoka herself at that point anyway, so she can use her ability to attack with another unit, give it +1 attack for the attack, before you then flip her onto the board and deploy her, and hopefully she'd be a 5/6 at that point because you'll have coordinate online, which would be very good. And then she would benefit from Cody because she'd be a friendly unit with getting +1/+1 and overwhelm. So right then and there, you're starting to feel the punch of having all these units synergizing with each other and pulling the coordinate from multiple units online at the same time.
Yeah, if you've got Cody on their 5-drop and you've built out the board, you could potentially end the game right there almost. Or
you could indeed. Another 5-drop that I've got is the only space unit in the deck as it is, which is another should I need it. You can play this for a 3/6 in space and get another clone trooper at the same time as you play it, which is it has potential, of course.
Yeah.
And then those are my 2 5-drops. So you're going to be playing those, or you could play a 3 and a 2, or any combination of them in order if you wanted to bulk out your board a little bit more rather than just play 1 unit, as well as deploying Ahsoka at the same time.
Okay. And I mean, Anakin was in this deck, but his coordinate was just draw a card.
It's a powerful ability. Drawing a card is roughly equivalent to paying 2 resources. That's the normal economy. You pay 2 resources, you draw a card, give or take. That's sort of the power budget they've got in line for them. And while that's good for building up your stable of cards in hand ready for the late game, by this point you want to have enough board presence that your punch is such that you're not looking to go further than another couple of turns in an ideal world anyway. If you do, you're probably lost.
Cool.
So I thought he wasn't worth adding, unfortunately, which is a shame because he's a really good looking card as well.
Yeah, no, he's a gorgeous looking card. I just actually don't know what deck he would be great in.
A Jedi or a Force deck, perhaps, is the only thing I can think of. But there are other options on the 5 costs, so that coordinate, draw a card isn't that amazing, really.
Yeah. Okay. All right.
No worries. Moving on to 6 resources. Captain Rex is an option, but he's not my primary option for this point in the game. Again, you include 3 of them because he's extremely good for, you play him, you get 3 units on the board the moment you play him. You get a 4/4, a 2/2, and a 2/2, which is great, especially if you've got Cody already on the board from the previous turn. And maybe Shark T adding +1 attack to your clone troopers, and Admiral Yularen adding +1 health to all of your hero units. It's looking pretty horrible by this point.
Yeah, I think Rex is a huge. I mean, you get 3 of them in the starter deck anyway, but I think he's got the potential to give you a huge swing when he's played.
Indeed. But the really powerful card that can have some serious punch on turn 5 and the 6 resource turn is this one.
I haven't seen this card actually.
So there's a very famous rare card from set 3, I think it is, called Wrecker. And Wrecker is disgustingly powerful. Let's just pull him up because he's worth looking at and making a comparison with. Wrecker is a infamous card for Sabine Green and other decks because you play him on 6 resources. You bring him in with ECL, so he ambushes. You defeat one of your own resources as a price for dealing 5 damage to a ground unit. And if you're shooting something with 6 or more health, that reduces their health down to 1, 2, or 3. He then ambushes into them with his Overwhelm and his attack of 7. So he kills them and does a load of damage straight into base, leaving a 7, 6, or a 7, however many hit points body he's got left on the board to attack next turn and be scary as hell. But it costs you a resource. And that's the problem. This one, the low altitude gunship works really, really well with the synergy in this deck because you're looking at going wide. You're looking at building a wide board state. So you basically get a similar sort of effect. If you ECL this in, you choose an enemy unit and deal a damage to it for each friendly Republic unit. So that's just on the board. So you could be shooting any unit for 3, 4, or 5 damage. You then use the ambush through ECL to attack it for 6 with an Overwhelm, and it's getting buffed with the +1 attack here, the +1 defense there, all over the place. So it will walk over something and do a bunch of damage straight to base.
Yeah, this is actually pretty huge. And it's not unique as well, actually.
Correct. So you can play this on 6, then you play another one on 7, and however you want to keep going with it, and you could just keep the board clear and walked over from there. It's got so much potential, this card.
A little harder to get, though. It is unique, right?
No, it's an uncommon.
Oh, sorry, uncommon. Yeah.
So it's actually easier to get than Wrecker. Not easier. And from there, we move on to the 1/7 drop in the deck, which is U-Wing Reinforcement. And basically, this allows me to play 3 units off the top 10 cards of my deck with a combined cost of 7 and just like put them all in play, and they can synergize off each other. So if you play one that buffs the others and you play one that heals, and it just gets yet more coordinate onto the board and more units. So it all just stacks up to a really, really wide board.
So it's up to it's up to 3 units. Normally when you play this, you're looking for 3, but in this deck, I feel like you'd probably be looking for like a Cody.
You could just go for a 1-cost unit and a low altitude gunship.
Yeah.
You could go for a Cody and 2 others. You could look for the units that heal your base. You could look for whatever you need at the time in the top 10 cards that you got. And those 10 cards, that's 20% of your deck.
Yes, yeah, that's true. Or well, not. Yeah. 50 is the minimum, isn't it? Yeah. Okay. Interesting. I feel like we've got to play this because I feel like this is a massive. I mean, I thought Ahsoka Tano's damage was, or the Ahsoka deck's damage was pretty overwhelming before, and this just seems better in almost every way.
There are decks that can handle units. The most powerful card that you tend to see in the game that can deal with this sort of a deck is unfortunately a pretty common card. You see it in Villain Green.
Yeah, is that the overwhelming barrage, right?
Yeah, which is horrible because you can just like do 6, 7, 8 damage across all the units distributed as you want, and then punch with a buffed unit. But not everything has this, and there's still only going to have 3 copies of this in the deck. So it's something that you've got to be aware of, but equally isn't going to be in every game that you face.
No, I mean sometimes it could just be as well. They could get overwhelming barrage one turn too late. You know.
Yeah, yeah. Or have
You
discarded it because they didn't need it at the time and they thought they
because
needed something else. Who knows?
they
Resource.
whittle them down. I like this a lot actually.
Yep. There are a few non-unit based cards in the main deck as well. There are going to be 3 copies of this because I figure that drawing 2 cards for 2 resources is really good if you've got a single clone trooper on the board, which you're likely to get from a unit, some ability in there. And that's great for if you just need to fill out your curve at some point if you've got 2 costs, or the game's getting a bit later and you want to just draw some extra cards to make sure, then it's a very solid card to play in that regard. Sometimes you just want to kill something.
Yeah, Open Fire is a great card. I used it against you a couple of times this week.
You completely slaughtered that hard deck with this one card.
Yeah.
At the right time. Yeah. Sometimes you just got to shoot someone.
The one thing that I like about Open Fire, it doesn't have any of those silly restrictions where it's like defeat a non-leader unit with power of 5 or less. You know, it's just like you just do direct 4 damage precisely where you need it. It's that bit from Lord of the Rings, like an Open Fire arrives precisely when you mean it.
Exactly. Oh god, yeah. And that hyperspace version here just looks really cool as well. That I've just cycled through to, so that's pretty tasty. And it's a common level card, so that should be very, very easy to get hold of.
Yep.
What else we got? This is the final card in the deck because you're always going to have Ahsoka because she's your leader. So having a couple of copies of this, you could attach it to Ahsoka. You could attack with her. You could attack with someone else. A +2 attack for 1 resource is always going to be nice and tasty. Plus, you get a free attack out of it for a bit of action economy, maybe helping you take initiative that little bit sooner.
Yeah, I mean, it's cheap as well, that's the thing, isn't it? Like, the amount of times you get to a turn where you just got 1 left over, cool. Let me just make one of those clones that's already whittling you down for a stupid amount of damage every turn.
Yeah.
Do 2 more, you know?
Exactly. You don't have to put it on Ahsoka. You get a little benefit if you do, but you don't have to by the slightest.
Yeah. Nice.
So that rounds out the main deck itself. Sideboard-wise, we have a 3rd copy of this to put in because I needed 1 card to fill out the sideboard with. And then other things we put into here. This is in there if you need a little bit more late game stuff going into, as obviously later in the game. It also lets you return Republic units from your discard pile back into your hand to play them next turn for yet more units and keep going. So it's got a little bit of use in that sort of sense. This one is a blinder, especially in this sort of a deck when you be playing or having a lot of cheap cost units. Let's say I've got a 2/2 token clone and you've got a 9/9 Star Destroyer. Well, I'll have that Star Destroyer and you can have a clone. Thanks a lot, mate. Cheers.
Yeah, it's a good one.
And the final sideboard card, just to round it out, is this one, because it is so versatile and useful to clear out a unit that's taken some damage and you just want to kill it, or maybe just put those last 2 points of damage on base to clinch you the game. It's a very straightforward, awesome card.
Yeah, I like the simplicity of the direct damage ones more, to be honest. Just like we say, you don't end up sitting going like, if that thing just had 1 more power, I could fell the dragon, you know, and it's like you're sat with fell the dragon going like, do I hold this now or do I get rid of it because the thing that he's got out that's causing me all the problems isn't power 5. If you're watching the video and you are at this point, this would be the point to take a screenshot.
Yep.
So you can copy the deck.
We'll put a link to the deck in the video description below, assuming we remember to do so and we don't completely forget. But ultimately, it is right here in front of you if you wanted to copy it.
We usually remember.
One way or the other, exactly.
If you have any suggestions on what we could have done even better, put them in the comments below. We love to hear about them. And if you do take the deck and you do enjoy playing it, then leave a comment for Mark and tell him.
Yeah, if you win a game, if you win some games, even if you win an event with it or just place highly, we'd love to hear. If you think we're talking crap, then we'd love to hear that as well. So that we can either completely agree with your assertions or tell you that you're talking crap. One of the two. Engagement is always fun.
Yeah. So leave a like. Subscribe if you want to see more Star Wars Unlimited content. We have lots coming out for Set 4. Live games, Unboxings.
Yep, all sorts of fun stuff. And we'll follow through the events for the UK as they come along. We'll get results as and when we can. And we'll keep showcasing all things Star Wars Unlimited in the future. Cheers.
All right. Great. Thank you. Bye bye.